Screen Slurps.
Hello and welcome to Screen Slurps, the movie review podcast where we discuss everything that is good, that is bad, and that is savage in the world of cinema. I'm Adam Meisner, here with the one and only of who knows how many out there. I don't know. I can't count. Laura Herlocker.
Hello. I had my mouth full of pumpkin spice when you started, and it really startled me.
Well, spit it all up. Come on. Please, actually, don't. That's not on the microphone.
Not here.
Yeah. God. This week we are talking about the classic film that probably many people don't know is a classic. Consider it a classic if you want. I think it's great. I just watched it for the first time. So did Laura. But a Robert Altman classic, The Player from 1992.
Yeah, we'll say like a really underrated, critically acclaimed film.
And you know what? I'm calling it a classic because, first of all, it's all about Hollywood and just what a grungy place it is. And you know what? I'm saying that because I've worked on plenty of movies myself, and as an indie filmmaker. Is that a laughable comment?
I mean, so. You kind of get it.
I do.
I think it makes sense. Like, you don't know the 80s LA Hollywood vibe, but you
really
get
don't,
the experience of making a movie.
That's right. Yeah. I have worked on movies. I've worked in the scene. I've been around the city of Chicago, up and down. I know what it's like to write a film. I know what it's like to be on set. I know what it's like to be off of the set working on a movie. But I think of all of those things, I know what it's like talking to people about making a movie. And I think this movie really gets into that. What it's like to have that connection, the psychology of being a filmmaker. And to see that as an audience member watching this movie and watching people interpret that for a film, I think it's like, wow, this movie really gets it. But it's not just about that, though. It's about a serial killer who is going after a Hollywood screenwriter, or a Hollywood screenwriter producer, I should say. Yeah, it's something. It's something, listeners, and we're going to talk all about it, because if you haven't seen it, go check it out. If you have seen it,
get ready.
Yeah, get ready. Watch it again and listen up, because we're going to talk about it. But before we get into that, we are going to talk about some of our side slurps from this past week. That's right, side slurps. If this is your first time listening, what I mean by side slurps is things we've done other than watching the movie of the week. Maybe we made some artwork. Maybe we have been watching some other shows. Maybe we learned how to cook some new recipes. I don't know. I'm not much of a cook myself, but Laura, maybe you can teach me something.
Sell yourself short.
Making eggs and bacon? I don't know.
We do love eggs and bacon.
Laura, what have you been up to?
Yeah, and really, I mean, I feel like I could have a lot of stuff to talk about, because it's been 2 weeks between our last recording, but I will not go too crazy here on my side slurps. In Book Corner, I read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which, if anyone has seen the series on Netflix, it's the book that it's based on, loosely adapted and based on. The book's really great. It's from like 1959 or something. It has a really subtle, creepy horror vibe to it, which I really enjoyed. And then I also read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, which is kind of Schitt's Creek inspired. So it's about a rich girl who is sent away to this small, fishing town in the Pacific Northwest, and is forced to live there like without all of her money and glitz and glamour.
It sounds very majestic.
She meets a man, falls in love. It's a good book. There were some spicy scenes also, so you know how that goes. Otherwise, I think the one thing I wanted to mention in the realm of things that I've watched is I watched the Lula Rich documentary on Amazon Prime, which was, I don't even know how to describe it, I guess. My mom and my sister were really into like LuLaRoe. I can't remember which one it is. Anyway, they were really into the clothes, a few years ago. So it's just interesting seeing the backside of that story and kind of the cult mentality of the owners and what went down with everything. So I still need to get you to watch it, to Adam. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll need to learn something about Rich.
Yeah. Otherwise, the other big thing that happened in our lives, I'm sure you're going to want to talk about too, Adam, is what we were doing last weekend, why we took a week off, really.
Absolutely. I mean, as adults, everybody gets busy from time to time. We certainly do.
Yeah.
But this past week, we were very busy taking part in Riot Fest in Chicago. It was a wonderful time, a music festival of sorts, where we got to see. Yeah, it was varying types of music, that's for sure, stretching from the types of Devo, which I was not expecting to be seeing Devo ever in my life, honestly.
And they were honest. They were probably one of my favorite.
They were very good
that we saw.
And to hear them play a song called Peekaboo, that was honestly
our new favorite.
Taking me by surprise, seriously, but it was good. And watching Run the Jewels, they were great. And having the chance to see Guar right up front and be sprayed by blood and
real blood.
Yeah, whatever the green stuff was that they sprayed us with too. That was
we definitely got a good mix of genres at Riot, which was great, like you're saying. And we saw like Go Bordello, right? So we had some like ska music. We had some really intense like middle school year emo music.
Oh yeah.
Recent hip hop. It was a really good mix of shows that we saw.
It was fantastic, and it was very exhausting.
Yes.
Makes me certainly feel like I need to go to the gym some more if I'm going to be walking around a music festival and getting exhausted.
Well, it doesn't help
that.
too that the past year and a half, essentially, we've been stuck in an apartment, you know, with COVID and everything going on.
Exactly.
So we're not walking as much as we used to when we'd have to walk to the office.
Exactly.
I think that hindered us a little this year.
Yeah. I mean, I just need to come home from work and ride the bicycle.
We'll go walk
or
around the
something.
block
a
few times.
Absolutely. So that was definitely something I was going to touch on, but I'm glad.
I knew you would want to talk about it too, so I didn't want to like totally overbear everyone on the side slurp of Riot Fest. But that's it for me. So what other side slurps do you have, Adam?
Well, other than Riot Fest, I'm glad we talked about that. But other than the great big music festival of Riot Fest, there were so many people at Riot Fest, by the way. But other than that, we have both been watching a couple shows on Netflix. That's probably the biggest things for the past week. Isn't that crazy? The streaming services are just taking over our lives. But the two shows we've been watching on Netflix that have been big hurdles for the past couple weeks, Love on the Spectrum has been a big thing for the past few days at least. And
I think just last night, didn't we start it last night?
Don't give it away.
I was just thinking, how sad is that? We watched it all in like one day.
It's such a sad show, but in such a happy way.
Happy. Yeah. You're sad because you're just so happy for the people on it.
Listeners, if you haven't checked out Love on the Spectrum, I highly recommend at least giving it a view. And just check it out.
It's so wholesome.
Yeah. It's something to learn about and just see this is something that's going on in the world. It's a learning experience.
I mean, it's a great way to see the world too through other people's perspectives.
Exactly.
So I think that's always worthwhile.
Yeah, I'm just so taken aback in a good way watching that show to see just wow, what an interesting and fascinating way to see the world through new eyes. It's so fascinating. And the other show that we've been watching, also available on Netflix, the newest season of The Circle.
Go Daddy Nick.
That another psychological experience in a very different way. In a very, very different way. But again, very interesting to see how people are thinking about one another. With that show, it's because they can't see each other in person. So it's interesting to think, they're thinking, is this person a catfish? Is this person real?
Well, and it's a great, like, analyzing relationships. Yeah, exactly. Like, are they being genuine or is this all a game, like strategy?
Yeah, and then it makes you think about yourself. Like, when you talk to people over text message, what are you trying to say to that person when you talk to them with your words, with your emojis? What are you trying to make with that statement? And when you talk to one friend and then you talk to another, how do you change your expressions? Would you use the same emoji with with those two different people? Because I know when I talk to people, I don't use the same emojis with different people.
Right.
It all depends on the people. When I talk to family members versus friends, I certainly use different emojis, or I use the different ways that I write my sentences.
Oh, totally. Yeah, your voice changes based on who you're talking to. It's just interesting, too, because yesterday we were listening to bring in other parts of our life. We were listening to that podcast episode about the history of emojis and emoticons. And they were talking about how, emojis were kind of brought to life because it's hard to get emotion or nuances from a text versus actually hearing someone's voice. So how do you get across when you're being funny or you're being, satirical or legit? And
they were saying the lack of emoji then is like, wow, you're just being, super stern.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see in this circle because you can tell, they're trying to play up that because they use tons of emojis and hashtags and things like that. It's crazy how that's become like part of our society and the way that we communicate.
Yeah.
It's my tangent.
And it's very interesting to think now if I, start texting someone, if I don't use an emoji, then are they going to think I'm, pissed off?
Exactly. Or like at work even. And when I send emails, I'm like, I put exclamation points because I'm trying to make it seem like I'm not
happy,
so intense.
You're excited.
Yeah, but I'm like, maybe that makes me look more unprofessional. But if I don't have it, am I being rude? It's a struggle.
Yeah. So things to think about, but two shows that me and Laura both highly recommend to check out, both available on Netflix right now. There's a few seasons of The Circle that are available. Season 3 just came out. Mm-hmm. And as for Love on the Spectrum, the second season just came out. But Laura and I are both just finishing up season 1. We're on the last episode right now.
Yeah.
So we're catching up, and we're very excited to be a part of that community. But that's where we've been on our side slurps this past week. That's where I'm leaving off on my side slurps. I can't wait to finish those off and start something fresh for next week. But that's where it leaves us to jump into our movie of the week, The Player. The Player, directed by Robert Altman from 1992. Taking us back.
We were mere babies.
Yeah, that's for sure. Oh boy. I couldn't have been watching this back in 92, but
no.
very, very excited to be checking this out. And I was very excited to be doing some research on Robert Altman as a director, too, because I was telling Laura before we started doing this now, I did not realize Robert Altman had also directed and he actually wrote the screenplay, I believe, too, for the Popeye film.
Which I love. I think a lot of people think that movie's crap, but I really enjoyed the Popeye movie.
The Popeye film's like a cult classic.
I mean,
now.
Robin Williams, the casting for that movie, the woman, she's from The Shining. I don't remember the actress's name, but the mother from The Shining, she plays Olive Oil, and she is perfect as Olive Oil. Like, the movie's just so good. And it's a musical. You gotta love it.
I'm sure we'll be talking about that another time, but for this time,
we'll go back.
all about The Player by Robert Altman.
I didn't know Robert Altman though. Really, he does have a lot of like credits under his name, but nothing. When I was looking through, there wasn't a lot that stood out of his movies that I was like, oh, aside from Popeye.
Well,
right?
He also did MASH.
I never watched MASH, so I don't know.
I think that's also it's all these cult classics.
Well, because also Gosford Park, right? That's the one with Elijah Wood, I think, and I feel like that's kind of like an under the radar cult kind of classic
for sure.
Maybe I'm making that up, but that's my perception of what it is.
And with The Player, another interesting thing about The Player was that the screenwriter on this, Michael Tolkien. The screenplay for The Player is also adapted from a paperback that Michael Tolkien had written. So he wrote this as sort of a novel, I believe, and this screenplay is then adapted from his novel. He was working with Robert Altman on the film. So the movie's heavily pulled from his book and adapted from his book. And then it all just kind of started going from there.
Yeah, I will say, though, we haven't read the book yet, but we were just watching behind the scenes. And it does seem like the movie took some big deviations from what happens in the book.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting for us to read it and see what the differences are that happen.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how much of a difference there is with the film from the book, because in the interviews that we watched, this is actually available on the Criterion Channel streaming service. From the interviews that we watched that were available on Criterion, Michael Tolkien did seem a little bit salty about the deviations that Robert Altman made.
Really? You got a salty vibe from it?
A little bit. He seemed like he was pulling a lot away from the script, but then there was also other times where Michael Tolkien was saying that he stuck true to the script as well. So I don't know. It seemed a little like 50-50. But that's also something that was brought up numerous times, is that Robert Altman's directing style for The Player and all of his other films, he's a very improv-focused director. He's not someone who likes to stick...
He's not a planner.
Yeah, he's not someone who likes to stick 100% to, just the script's going to be this way. It's going to be, you move this way on set and you go to that point and you go this way. He more so likes to make it so the actors can do their own thing and do it, their way and try new things.
Yeah, which I think adds a sense of like authenticity to his movies, at least from seeing in The Player. Like, it's believable, these characters and the role, the people that they're pretending to be. I think because he gives them so much freedom to kind of encompass the character themselves, it definitely has a credibility and authenticity to the movie. Like, you could believe that Tim Robbins is Griffin. Like, he's this hard edge is the word you want, but you know what I mean, this kind of douchey film executive. Like, you believe that's him.
Yeah, and I think it was the production designer who was saying that they were calling it or he was calling it planned improv or so, where it would be like it started as improv and it wasn't planned, and so something would happen, such as the scene where
Bonnie.
Bonnie, I think her heel broke on set when she was walking. And after that had happened, then all of a sudden Robert Altman was like, yeah, when your heel broke, now we're going to shoot more takes of that scene or that shot. I want your heel to break every time now. Yeah,
which is interesting because I feel like other movies. So a really good example that comes to mind instantly is like in Django, right? Where Leonardo DiCaprio breaks that glass and his hand is bleeding. Like, that wasn't planned, right? But it just happened and it worked out so well they kept it in the movie. But that was a one-off.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to shoot that again.
Right. But Robert Altman would have been like, oh, yes, this looks great. We need a few more takes with this happening. This needs to happen every time now.
And if that was the case, though, too, with Robert Altman, if someone actually cut their hand, though, on Robert Altman said, I think he would be like, all right, let's get like a blood effect.
Yeah. I didn't mean he would cause people to harm themselves over and over. Just like Django was the first example that came to mind of something that happened and it kept in the script.
But that's good.
I do think it's interesting, too, as we're talking about Robert Altman and kind of filming of this movie. So we're talking about, he would do multiple takes of these. But I think one of the biggest things we need to talk about is the first, 7 minutes of this movie. Is that how long the opening scene is? It was 7 minutes of one long take. And when I was reading, it said they only did 15 takes total and they used the 10th one, I think. But so that kind of goes against what we're saying, where he would have them do something, not against, but just another example of the way he directs. That was so well thought of in his mind and how he wanted to look that literally he could finish 1 7-minute take of a film in a day.
Yeah, they choreographed it in a day and a half and then they shot it in half of a day.
I loved that scene too. I think it's one of the best parts of the movie. It really gives you a sense of the culture and the environment of the film studio, because it's so hectic, right? There's so many things going on, so many people and different conversations happening at once. In one corner you see a guy giving a bunch of Japanese executives from Sony or something a tour trying to get money. Then you got the mail boy who gets hit. And then you've got Griffin, walking around hearing pitches from people. There's other people having pitches. It really gets you into the state of mind of kind of just the absolute craziness that is Hollywood.
Yeah, so the big thing with The Player, and I think what got you and I just sucked into even wanting to watch this movie, was the actors that are in this movie as leading actors are Tim Robbins, Fred Ward, Whoopi Goldberg, Peter Gallagher's in this movie, and honestly, everyone's
in this movie. If you talk about cameos, that's something we can also
Reynolds
get into.
Has a cameo in this movie.
I think on Wikipedia it said there were like 65 cameos.
Sean Connery's got a cameo in this movie.
Cher, John Cusack, like literally everyone in Hollywood at the time is in this movie.
Yeah. It's a big thing. And I mean, as they should all have cameos in this movie, because it's supposed to be all about Hollywood.
Exactly. But I do think the big focus is on Tim Robbins.
Yeah.
You know, even like Fred Ward's character, Peter Gallagher's character, they're very supporting. You know, the focus really is on Tim Robbins.
But to step away from the technical aspects for just one hot second, I didn't even touch on what the whole
We're just too excited to talk about it.
And it's a fantastic thing. But the whole film encompasses what the plot of this movie circles around. A very brief summary of this movie would basically be that Tim Robbins' character, Griffin Mill, he is a Hollywood studio executive who basically covers what would be a good descriptor, Laura, the screenwriting studio executive.
People give him pitches for new movies and he either says, yeah, well, let's buy it, we'll make a movie, or he says, no, this is a bad pitch, move on.
And so with that in mind, a Hollywood studio executive, Griffin Mill, is being sent death threats by a writer whose script he rejected, but which one? We don't know who is sending him death threats.
Yeah. I mean, he probably rejects so many scripts and pitches. So.
And that's the thing, too. In some of the interviews that Laura and I were watching, Tim Robbins had admitted that he went to Hollywood, as I'm sure he does on a daily basis, but he went into an office meeting with one of these screenwriting producers just to kind of sit in and listen to some of the phone calls that they got from people who are pitching scripts, and he said that he heard a few of the phone calls of these people who are pitching scripts just to get an idea of the character that he was soon going to be playing in The Player. And I can only imagine just the life of one of these producers who has to sit there and listen to all of these people calling in and saying, hey, I've got an idea for a script, I'd like to pitch it to you. And pitching it over the phone that would be awful in itself.
I just feel like that's got to be one of the most stressful jobs. Because what if, too, you reject a script and then say like another production company buys it and it becomes this huge hit.
Yeah.
And then you're the person that's like, shit, I rejected it. Like
you work for Paramount or something and you're like, I'm sorry, we can't take that.
Happen,
and like Warner Brothers picks it up.
Yeah.
And
well, we've heard stories, right, of like Disney turning something down and then, you know, whoever else, I can't even think of it. Paramount
now
or
it's going to be like Disney could turn something down and it's like, okay, Netflix
picks it. Well, yeah, I think Netflix is the big one right now because they're even picking up canceled TV shows, but that's another thing.
It's something.
But the stress of that job that Griffin has got to be, I can't even imagine, more so than other like other roles in the film industry, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, that is incredibly stressful, and it becomes it's the job of a bidding war, basically. It's like the stock market, essentially, where it's just kind of like, I will give you this much for your script, or I'm sorry, I can't take your script. And, if you were to offer such and such an amount, then if that screenwriter's like, thank you for your offer, and then goes to another studio and gets more money and they take that offer.
Yeah.
And then what if it doesn't make any money, or what if it makes a ton of money? It's crazy. It's a crazy concept.
And that leads into one of the conflicts. Like, as we continue with the plot, it kind of seems like Griffin may be losing his job and Peter Gallagher may be coming in and taking over. So he has, like, that's one of the conflicts of the plot, right? Is him worrying about Peter Gallagher's character, kicking him
his job, basically.
Kicking him to the sidewalk.
Yeah, Larry Levy, I believe, is Peter Gallagher's character.
Yeah.
And Griffin Mill, Tim Robbins' character, is worried that Larry Levy is going to be taking his job and kicking him out.
Right.
Because,
and on top of that, he's got these death threats coming to him.
Yeah, because Griffin Mill hasn't been taking in any good scripts lately. And so he's like, well, this is a bunch of BS and I need to do something. And he's worried that this one screenwriter who he didn't accept his script is the one who's writing him these death threats. And so he decides he's going to go meet up with him at a bar and talk to him about this.
Well, who he thinks is the screenwriter threatening him.
Exactly.
Which happens to be the guy who plays Kingpin in Netflix's Daredevil.
Weird turn of events.
Just I got to make connections where I know them.
Yeah.
So yeah, he meets this aspiring screenwriter. Griffin thinks that this guy is the one sending him death threats, but I don't think we learned later he wasn't, right? He just was upset with Griffin for not accepting his script.
But at the time, he thinks he is the one who is writing him these death threats.
Because the screenwriter both of them get very heated, and they get in a fight. And
at that point in the movie, it does seem very much like he is the one who is writing the death threats. And when they do get heated, then, unexpectedly as a viewer, it's kind of like, what are you going to do about it? Like with him getting heated and he's walking away like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to let the whole studio know that you're a failure and that you didn't take my script. And
so Griffin panics.
Yeah. Griffin panics and
bashes his head.
What do you do? Yeah. What do you do when you panic? You just, bash the guy's head in and shove his head underwater.
They definitely made it seem like Griffin. It looks like Griffin didn't purposely kill him because he walks away thinking he's just like passed out. Then he turns around and realizes he's dead, and that's when he starts to panic.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just like Griffin being taunted like that just got into like a blind rage, right?
I did not expect that either. I was thinking that guy was just going to be passed out, like you were saying.
But Griffin definitely like bashed his head and held him underwater. So. He's dead.
That was not something I honestly did not expect that in this movie. I was thinking, okay, they're just gonna have a little tussle or something, and he'll just knock him out on the ground and walk away. And Griffin really freaked out.
Yeah, and then he like falls in love with the dude's girlfriend, which that's like the one part of the movie I'm not the biggest fan of. Like. It's like he's trying to assume this guy's life almost, right? He kills him and then gets with this woman. But I think the point of this movie is like, because Bonnie is probably like the one only good character who has like morals, and she loses her job in the end and falls apart. Whereas Griffin kind of succeeds, as we'll talk about. So I think the movie is definitely a look at how kind of people who are out for themselves kind of succeed in life, which is unfortunate. But
it's also showing like the grunge of like the Hollywood industry and everything too. To correlate with what you're saying about people who are out for themselves. And it's just like he went after this guy to try and figure out who was sending him death threats. He was threatened by what he was saying about him and his job and ruining him. So he took him down, which I do not feel comfortable about him making that sort of,
obviously,
making that his way of completing that scenario. But, Griffin Mills, you do you, buddy. And then, he tried to make it seem like an accident, obviously, by bashing out the guy's car window and just going away.
But it didn't work. Like, I feel like the police definitely knew that he had killed him. And Griffin just got it. As the movie goes on, you learn that Griffin gets away with the murder. And essentially gets away with it because of who he is. He's a rich executive who works for a big film company, so he gets away with it because he's got money and is able to have a good defense.
But the movie just makes his character look so dirty through all of this, but at the same time he's also the protagonist. He's like the villain and he's the protagonist simultaneously. And as an audience member, you're watching this and you still kind of like Griffin's character. You like him, but you also think like this guy he's like
horrible,
a slime ball.
Yeah.
But I've got to like him because he's the main character. And
I think that says something about, Tolkien and his ability to create a character, but also Altman, because he had such a huge, and Tim Robbins himself, like as he playing the character, says something about all three of them, about a way that they're able to make the audience not endeared, but kind of endeared to a really faulty and flawed and horrible main character.
Like, he has so many problems, and I think that is part of the reason I enjoy this movie.
Yeah.
Is because I'm watching it, and I'm watching a villain get away with all these things as a protagonist, and I'm just like enthralled by
because it's
like
so different from what we usually see.
He's not this like hero character that's like, I'm gonna make everything great. It's like, this guy is so screwed up. He's like wrecking everybody's, like, I mean, he's not wrecking everyone's lives, but like, he's got problems.
Yeah,
he's trying to figure things out, and he's getting death threats via postcard still after he thinks he's like destroyed who was sending him death threats. He's still getting death threats, so he's trying to figure that out while he's also hooking up with the person that he just murdered. He's hooking up with his girlfriend, and while simultaneously
while trying to keep his job,
and while cheating on the girl that he was with. So
yeah,
he's got problems. He is a slime ball, and
that's like we're saying, that's why this movie's so good though. Other movies, it's like the baddies are bad, the goodies are good, everything ends up happy in the end. And this kind of totally reverses that whole idea and trope of like what a movie should be, because you have this flawed character who you're still like entranced with, and he succeeds. Like, the goodies don't win.
Yeah, there's just so much going on, and then he keeps, having problems at the studio. Obviously, it's like he's trying to keep his job going while he's getting these death threats, and it's like, who is sending me death threats? And while that's going on, Whoopi Goldberg is a private detective who's trying to take him down. That also had my mind blown, and I couldn't get over the fact that I very much enjoyed Whoopi Goldberg's performance in this movie, but she was a very like stern and comical at the same time detective who was very sort of sarcastic with him. I'm like, man, she is a jerk to this guy.
Yeah. I really loved that scene in the police department when she's like arguing with the other detective about the tampons. You remember that scene? And I was reading somewhere that was improvised. So they just like made that up on set that day, the whole argument about the tampons. But I thought it was really funny. And the other detective is like chasing that fly around the whole time.
It just, ironically, the detectives made me more angry than Tim Robbins' character, Griffin Mill, because the detectives, you would think that as a detective, they would be compassionate or something. They would be kind, and they would be like, we just want to know, like, if, you're the guy. Of course, they're not going to be kind to some murderer.
They got to,
But the thing is, like,
he did it.
They're just really grimy with this dude, and he is, I mean, as he should be, I guess. He's also being really slimy with them, trying to evade admitting to murdering some guy. So sliminess both ways, I guess. But I did not enjoy the personality of the detectives, and most of the time I did not enjoy Griffin Mill's personality, I would say. But at the same time, I very much enjoyed Griffin Mill's character. It's such a hard way to describe this movie.
No, you have to watch it.
Yeah.
Just go watch the movie, and then you'll kind of understand what we're trying to say here.
How do I say that I really enjoyed watching Griffin Mill's character, and I really enjoyed Tim Robbins' performance.
Oh, Tim Robbins was amazing.
But Griffin Mills as a character, no one should be Griffin Mill.
Well, it's interesting to just see his characters like spiral and how he handles everything, which is, that's part of the why, I'm part of this group of people. Why are the people so obsessed with true crime right now? It's kind of, this fits into that perfectly. You're like seeing and trying to understand the psyche of someone that is crazy, crazy, mentally unstable. So it's kind of just, it's interesting to see how they handle situations and how they move on from things.
So as the movie progresses, there's crazier and crazier things that come into play as he continues to get these postcards of death threats and things like that. At one point, there's a rattlesnake in his car that he has to deal with. Just don't ever put a rattlesnake in anyone's car. Don't put one in my car. Don't put one in your friend's car. It's just not a kind thing to do.
Not a safe thing.
Yeah, don't do that. He deals with that, though. He can handle rattlesnakes. Tim Robbins, I'm sure, he's the rattlesnake wrestler of all people.
Beats it with a tire iron, doesn't he? So...
I do not know how he handled that, but he bludgeons it with his umbrella.
Oh, it's an umbrella? Okay,
Yeah.
I was thinking it was like a tire iron from the
Close
back.
enough. I mean, use an umbrella as a tire iron,
yeah.
sure.
That makes it funnier.
So that goes on, and as that progresses, there's one point where he ends up getting approached by two other people about a pitch for a screenplay.
Oh my God. And the one is the manager from Spice World, and I love that guy.
And this is the one thing that really had my mind twist with this film in terms of me thinking. I mean, I'm thinking the entire film, but I mean, they pitched this movie and they've got this very intense sort of concept of a movie where there's a DA and the DA can I even remember all of this?
I know it was such an involved script, and it ended up with a woman who was put to the death penalty for killing her husband, but she didn't actually kill him.
Yeah, and she was in a gas
DA
chamber. Fell
fell in love with her, and he's trying to prove her innocence before they, kill her in the gas chamber.
Right.
That's essentially what the script was called. Habeas corpus. I remember that. It was a very involved script.
And Griffin Mill is asking, and there's going to be, really famous people who are the actors. And they're like, no, we don't want anyone super famous.
Super indie.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Like, this is going to be like new. That's what's going to make this blow up, is that we're not going to have really famous people on this film. And they're like, wow, okay, cool. So then Griffin is like, okay, we'll take this on. And now I'm trying to really remember the twist we had with this.
Yeah, well, so the original script that the Spice World guy pitched was that the woman did die in the end. They weren't able to save her, right? And then it was nobody's. And Griffin was like, in his mind, he's like, this is not going to work. People aren't going to like this. It's not going to be a good movie. So he's like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this to Larry, Peter Gallagher's character, make him think it's a great script, right? Like, pitch it, he's going to accept it, they're going to make the movie. And then Griffin, will step in and make the changes to the ending that I know will make it a blockbuster. I'll look like the, hero of the day who saved this film, and I won't lose my job. Which is what happens. Yeah. So Peter Gallagher accepts the script. He starts working on the movie. And we don't see a lot of that happening. It kind of happens in between, like a time jump, really.
Yeah, they show it's like how many years later or something, like 3 years later.
So, yeah, I don't remember. There was a time jump.
Yeah.
But then we see that Griffin has become the president, essentially, of the film company because he, made the changes to this movie, got big stars.
Bruce Willis and Julia Roberts,
which is so
which
funny.
They said they didn't want.
But the funniest thing is, in the first 7.5 minute thing, right? Every time someone was giving a pitch and they were like, "Oh, who would play these?" They always said Julia Roberts or Bruce Willis.
Saying Julia Roberts and Bruce Willis.
Julia Roberts would be great for this. Oh, Bruce Willis would be this. So it was great to see then at the end they actually had Bruce Willis and Julia Roberts in the movie. But yeah, we see like Griffin's plan worked. He's now the president. The film is like a huge success. And Peter Gallagher's character like looks up to him now and is like a mentor.
Yeah. And
so everything works out for him.
It's horrible, like, contrast to where the girl he was dating in the beginning, who was like head of the story editors or something like that, Bonnie.
Yeah.
She is watching the ending of Habeas Corpus. And she gets up, turns around, and she said, I thought there wasn't going to be any famous actors in this. And they're like, what are you talking about? No, it's fine the way it is. And she's like, no, you said that there wasn't going to be, the movie wasn't going to be like this. And they're like, you know what? You're fired. And they just fire her right there from her job. And she comes out crying to Griffin Mill, and he says, sorry, that's how it is. And just, gets in his car and doesn't talk to her, Well,
that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier, where she's like the one good character with morals and she ends in failure, where all these sleazy guys succeed and are rich.
Outside of a studio.
Yeah.
And then him after, Griffin Mill, him in his Range Rover, he might have a sports car in the end. I can't remember. But
I think is he in a convertible or something? He's got a car phone, so.
Yeah. But Bonnie is crying on her knees or, trying to talk to him in his car. And he just gets in, ignoring her. He drives off. And after that entire movie of him receiving death threats and him after he had murdered someone. It's just absurd. And he's going off to his girlfriend or wife,
I think.
Yeah,
she's
wife's
pregnant,
house.
isn't
Yeah.
she, at the end? So
Yeah. She was pregnant in real life at that point. They were talking.
Oh, yeah,
about
I
in the
remember.
interview. Yeah,
That's
they were
why-
saying she was pregnant.
that's why they changed the sex scene that they had
Yeah.
to show only like from the neck up or something,
Right.
which everyone thought was like amazing and so well done. But it's just because she didn't want to be nude.
Because she was pregnant. Yeah, it's very interesting. And spoiler alerts, I will reveal.
I mean, we've already revealed a lot. So
Exactly.
we're a little late on the spoiler.
Spoilers. Of course, there's spoilers. Well, there's a scene earlier in the film after Griffin Mill murders who he thought was sending death threats. There is a scene where he is at the funeral for the man who he thought was giving the death threats, and there is an actor who is giving a eulogy. There is a screenwriter who is giving a eulogy for the man who Griffin thought was the man who was writing the death threats. And at the end of the film, Griffin receives a phone call about the death threats and how the death threats are going to continue to be written and sent to him about a film. And
No, I don't think the guy when he called was saying he's going to continue with the death threats. He was pitching essentially the story of the movie and saying, if you buy this script, everything is forgotten. You know, give me the money for this script, and the guy gets away with it. Because that's why when Griffin is like, he gets away with it, and the guy on the phone's like, yeah. So then Griffin's like, oh shit, okay, I'm scot-free.
That's a fair agreement then. But I mean, the guy who makes the phone call at the end was the guy who was saying the eulogy in the beginning. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. I wonder if they just used the same actor because they were like, just use it, or if they were trying to actually say like, this is the guy that was writing the postcards all along.
I mean, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, which is a very interesting take on it. I mean, then he would, which makes sense because if he was friends with the guy that died, maybe he was following him and saw it happen or something.
Yeah, I mean, my assumption was that the guy who was writing the death threats would be like, you know, someone who
Was somehow connected. Yeah, agreed.
But the phone call is completely in relation to the movie, the player in itself. It's very, very meta. It's very, very meta to think that the phone call is just a description of the entire movie that just happened.
I feel like we've reviewed so many movies where this has happened lately. Like, what's the Bollywood movie? Why can I not think? Om Shanti Om. You know, the ending is like a recap of the whole movie. Moulin Rouge, the end musical production they do is a whole recap of the movie. Spice World, at the end, the guy is pitching what's happening with the Spice Girls. And then here again, we got a guy who's pitching a movie that's been the entire plot of the movie. And it's just, we've seen this trope so many times recently, which is really interesting.
Not a bad trope, though. I think it's very cool.
No, I mean, they're all great movies.
Yeah, and that's what it leaves off on Tim Robbins, Griffin Mill. He basically agrees to the phone call. Essentially, it's just kind of like, yeah, we'll talk about it. And then he ends up at his wife's place, and they basically
Happily ever after.
Happily ever after, if you want to call it happily ever after.
I did, while looking up some things, I do see that there is a sequel, a second book that was written. They didn't make the movie, but I was like, shoot, now I want to know what happens in the next one.
Was it written by Michael Tolkien?
Yeah. It's called The Return of the Player.
Very interesting. And we'll certainly have to check out that book, the first and perhaps even the second now, knowing that there is a second. I'm really curious to see how this is written out in the book format. Yeah, this movie as a whole is just really something different.
Yeah,
it's
agreed.
Just not something that I would think to see as a movie. I mean, it's like a
movie about movies.
A movie about movies, yeah.
And Tim Robbins was so good. So I saw him in Mystic River, but otherwise I don't think I've seen a lot of movies that he's acted in. And I was really, amazed by his acting in this film.
Well, perhaps we'll have to watch Jacob's Ladder then, because he was talking about how that one didn't blow up very well, in a good way, I say. But he was apparently in that film.
We'll have to watch some more Tim Robbins.
Yeah, make that our homework assignment But let's jump into some reviews of The Player. I did see on the mainstream, big old popular review site, Rotten Tomatoes, that The Player, great reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, 98% score by critics of The Player on Rotten Tomatoes. That is absolutely incredible, considering that this film is from 1992. The critics' reviews are just fantastic.
I mean, but does that surprise you? It's a movie about movies, so of course the critics and the Academy are gonna love it. That's my feeling.
No, I mean, it does surprise me, though. You can still make bad movies about movies.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like they love it. They're like, oh, it's our life. Minus the murder.
And an 84% from the audience score.
Yeah, which I would agree. I mean, as I'm talking about, like, of course they love it. It's about movies. I also like this movie, so I agree. Those scores seem pretty accurate to me. And I mean, even Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars, which is, that's the max, right? He does out of 4?
Yes, correct.
So 100%.
And then there's one critic from the Chicago Reader on Rotten Tomatoes that did not like it.
She gave it a splat.
Jonathan Rosenbaum.
Oh, he gave it a splat.
Who said, quote, "It's supposed to be scathing, but the pleasure it affords is like what you get from watching the Oscars, celebrity spotting and in-jokes."
I will say, a lot of the movie I just spent spotting the celebrities in the background. So I kind of fell into that category maybe because I was like, oh, it's Jeff Goldblum. Oh, it's John Cusack. It's Cher.
What do you? Why hate on the movie though? Like,
but they're saying that's kind of like a cheap gag.
That wasn't the only pleasure I gained from the movie.
No, but their critic is saying that's how they felt about it. People have different opinions.
Yeah, to each their own.
The movie too, I mean, it was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, I believe. It didn't win any of them, though, I don't think. But nominated for Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Editing. Which the editing in this movie was great.
Yeah, I thought it was very well put together on many different technical.
There were some really good, like,
ways.
nice shots that happened. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, it looked great. It was very well put together artistically. I thought the costumes were great. I thought all of the actors did a wonderful job. And yeah, I mean, it was something that was fresh. I think from a acting standpoint, thinking about the way Robert Altman directs in terms of the improvisation, it's just nice to see the actors have their own fresh standpoint rather than have to be so robotic, I will say, like many movies do. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, I will say that I think it is time to go into the Slurps Up or Slurps Down section of our review. And that being said, listeners, Slurps Up means we recommend, we think it's good, we think you should check it out. And Slurps Down means that's a no-no. Movie is not good, and don't even think about putting your eyes onto this thing. Laura, what would you say about this film? Slurps Up or Slurps Down?
Definitely a Slurps Up. It's not my favorite. I'm probably not going to watch it again and again, but I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. From what we've talked about in this whole episode, right? The acting was great. Tim Robbins is so good in it. I was hoping for a little bit more Peter Gallagher because I love Peter Gallagher, but you know, focuses on Tim Robbins, so we'll take it. Acting was great. The kind of twist and the way that they suck you in and make you like this bad, horrible person was a really interesting thing that doesn't happen a lot in movies. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I give it 4 out of 5 slurps, which is, I think, good for me. I haven't rated a lot of movies that high, I feel like, so we're doing good. Definitely a Slurps Up. What about you, Adam?
You know, I get a kick that you have a numerical score on your slurps. You have a...
Yeah, I mean, I like to rate things. I rate all the books I read on Goodreads, get to rate all the movies that I watch now.
Yeah, but there's like a Slurps Up or Slurps Down, and then you have like a number to staple to it.
Because there is a wide variety within the Slurps Up. There are things I slurp up.
How many slurps are you taking?
So it's always out of 5.
I'll bring a straw next time.
But I'm saying I can give Slurps Up to. Sometimes I give Slurps Up to a movie that I give like a 2 out of 5 to, because I feel like it's worth watching one time. You know what I mean? So I feel like I need the numerical rating to really like give you an idea of really how I feel.
Oh my goodness. How many slurps are you taking, listeners?
How
1, 2,
many
3,
slurps?
4, 5.
It's taking me probably like 50 slurps to get through
Spooky
this Starbucks drink. Oh, it is spooky season.
I'm sorry. Listeners, I'm having a great time here.
Adam, let's do your slurps up, slurps down.
For this movie, I would give this movie a slurps up. And I think that's because for the very first time watching this movie, I gotta say, I was just really pulled into watching it from the actors' performances, from the technical quality of this movie, and from just what the plot had in this entire film. I really, as we said earlier, I've personally never seen a movie quite about this kind of a topic, about the film industry. And from what I do for my personal freelance work and things like that, I felt a real relation to what the movie covered, and I was really just sucked into what the movie talked about. And I think if I was still in school or something, I would watch this movie as my own personal homework assignment to learn more about Robert Altman as a director and kind of study on what he does, and also on the actors' performances as well. I think this is a great movie to look into what Robert Altman does as a director and compare that to some other famous directors, as I've seen online through my research for this, as he compares to other directors, such as they say, like Martin Scorsese or even David Lynch. They've all got their ups and downs. I like to think mostly ups, but it's such an interesting thing. I really want to watch a lot more of Robert Altman's work now, and this movie I could definitely go back to and watch again, just because it's got such an interesting style about it. So I would definitely give this one a slurps up. I'm very, very curious to see more of Robert Altman's work, and I'm very excited to watch more movies like this now, and can't wait to see more things like this film. With that being said, let's go into our solo plug time. Laura, where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on TikTok at artielu, ARTIELU, or on Instagram at LHERLOCHER.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, SoundCloud. I make music. That's right, people. I make music for your ears. Originals, covers, you name it. What you want to hear, just let me know. I will put it online for your listening pleasure. And that wraps it up for this episode of Screen Slurps. Be sure to follow us on social media at Screen Slurps on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And be sure to listen to us on Spotify, Ghana, or just about any other podcast streaming service out there. And if you enjoy what you hear, slide on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. It will help us a lot. And if there's any crazy movies you want to hear about, let us know. Leave a comment on one of our social media pages, and trust me when I say we will be sure to talk about it. So, closing out, I'm Adam Meisner.
And I'm Laura Herlocker.
Slurps up, and we will catch you later.